Hello and welcome to the RAPID7 webcast, The Attacker Mindset, How to Understand and Avoid Malicious Behavior. My name is Kelly Garofalo and I'll be your host for this webcast. Today's broadcast will run for approximately 1 hour, including time for questions, and we will record this session and make it available on our website in the next few days. You can ask questions at any time using the chat feature, and we will try to address them during the Q&A session. Attendees of this webcast are eligible for 1 CPE credit. You can self-report on your organization's website, and we strongly recommend you keep the email invitation as confirmation for possible future audits. For detailed instructions on how to self-report, please visit bit.ly/R7CPE and note that the URL is case sensitive. Today's presenters are Dan Tendler, a pen tester and network security consultant at RAPID7, and Bill Bradley, a product marketing manager here at RAPID7. So now over to you guys.
Thanks, Kelly. Hi, this is Bill Bradley with RAPID7. I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon or morning, depending on where you're calling in from, for the RAPID7 webinar, The Attacker Mindset, How to Understand and Avoid Malicious Behavior. What we're going to go through today is really discuss the evolution of hacking, then identify and discuss some of the common motivations of the hackers, look at some of the common attack techniques, and then from there touch on a RAPID7 Controls Insight product that can help eliminate some of these problems with hackers getting into your network. And finally, at the end of the session, we will leave time for a Q&A. The anatomy of an attack. So there is a theoretical model out there called the Advanced Persistent Threat Model that tries to neatly package what an attacker goes through when they look at your network, looking at a target. This model has several steps, starting with the first step I call do your homework. This is where your attacker will look at your organization, try and find as much as they can about it as a way to gain credibility so they can use their attack. An example of this was the RSA attack from a couple years back, where they used targeted emails with a malicious attachment to make it in through to the network. Once they were in, they were able to go lateral inside the organization and find those high-value systems. This leads to the next step, the infiltration. This is the actual attack once they're in when they go after your organization and get into the network. Another example vector of how people get into the attack, actually two examples, both using the same method, is via USB drives. 2 years back, several U.S. power plants were targeted by a clever hacker who walked around a campus and dropped some infected USB drives around. People picked them up and, natural curiosity, plugged them into their laptops. This infected those laptops. This is a nice way of getting around all those security controls that you may put at your perimeter to keep those threats out. More recently, Monday or Tuesday of this week, the South Korean attack, where approximately 40% of the country had credit card information stolen via an unprotected USB port. That's 22 million citizens in South Korea all had compromised credit card information. What this leads to is there are various reports that cite how much it costs to replace a credit card. Is it $3? Is it $5? Is it $10? Regardless of that number, multiply that by 22 million. The other side of that was 3 of those credit card organizations were ordered to cease operations for the first quarter. 3 months of the year, they're pulling in 0 revenue while they're still incurring those costs. Once you're in, the next portion of that attack life cycle is getting your beachhead. So you're establishing a secure location inside the organization so that you can come back later, perhaps to find renewed information. Is it credit card data? Is it personally identifiable information? These databases are continually growing. By having that backdoor in there, you're able to come back in there and get that additional information. Finally, once you're completed, it's that you prepare for the future. So you're leaving those trails so you can get back in there without being detected. Another example of an attack is the GitHub recent attack, where weak passwords were targeted. GitHub is a collaboration development site where a brute force attack via 40,000 unique IP addresses was targeting the weak passwords, people who use password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to secure their development information. All of these threats, all of these attacks look at this model as an interesting theoretical exercise. What I want to do now is pass the microphone on to Dan Tendler, one of our consultants and penetration testers here at RAPID7, to walk you through a more realistic view of what it's like out in the network. Dan, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Certainly. Thanks, Bill. I'm Dan. I'll be your ponytail bad guy for this portion of the presentation. I'll be talking about some of the techniques that I use and the tools that I use in my endeavors in breaking things that need to be broken when I get put onto an assessment. First, we'll talk about the reasons why bad guys do what they do. A lot of times it's opportunistic. It's targeted in some cases, usually if it's financially or politically targeted, hacktivism, state-sponsored type stuff. But it's very unlikely that, you know, in the private sector you'd see a lot of that, really beyond a small percentage. Generally, what we get to deal with in normal business land is sort of the white noise, I like to call it the watermark of standard bulk attacking. Generally speaking, the reason that you'll see these sorts of things is because you're connected to the internet. By and large, if you have any kind of internet connection and you do any kind of packet sniffing or packet tracing on it, you'll see that you're getting scanned and prodded every day, all the time, from a variety of different places, from inside and outside of the United States. Generally speaking, from either hosts that are untouchable in other countries that have, you know, extradition laws that favor them, or from compromised machines here in the States, or what have you. There's a pretty colorful cornucopia of different things that'll reach out and touch you over the internet. And the reasons that people will tend to do this sort of stuff vary. Sometimes it's hacktivism, sometimes it's people being angry with authority, sometimes it's they're trying to prove a point, maybe it's the United States and Israel working together to write a really scary, very targeted piece of malware to attack a refinery in another country. Sometimes it's retaliatory. You know, you get one angry IT guy leaving the company, that sort of thing. And so, generally speaking, while the motivations tend to vary, all the attack vectors are always going to be the same. If you have SQL injection, it doesn't matter why somebody exploits a SQL injection necessarily. The SQL injection is still going to be there, and it's still going to be exploitable. Oops, there we go. So generally speaking, when you see attacks like this, they tend to flow the same way, although, again, most of the time it's opportunistic and it's based on what observable access the bad guy can see. The first goal is to get access, and the second goal is to basically maintain access. Usually, the intentions of the bad guy are, in some cases, you know, for example, when HP Gary was compromised, and during all the Sony hacks several years ago, it seemed that the onus was to try and get as many mail spools from as many executives as was possible. So, in that particular vein, the intention was to maintain presence for the sake of eavesdropping and espionage. So sometimes you'll see defacement. For example, if anybody recalls last December when the Syrian Electronic Army was able to compromise something like 8 to 10 major news media outlets and have their websites redirect to the Syrian Electronic Army website, CNN being one of them. It was quite interesting that the news being hacked made the news. So it was very meta. But in that regard, it was defacement. You'll see like Palantir and HB Gary and Sony getting hacked, and that's reputation damage, monetary damages, and who hasn't heard of the Target breach that just hit Target recently? Theft of intellectual property. You'll sometimes see, but generally speaking, theft of IP happens with competing businesses that are literally like inciting espionage on one another. Eavesdropping, wiretapping, and intelligence gathering we've seen before with all the HB Gary and the Palantir stuff. And always, you know, executives mail spools making it a pay spin. So usually, you know, as Bill said, a lot of organizations will show very pretty graphs and very pretty charts describing what they believe to be how the attacker is thinking and what the attacker is doing. And this is generally me when I see that sort of stuff. Like, really, did the bad guys actually attack you or invite you to quarterly meeting where they're discussing their financial goals and their investors are there. Like, they don't work the same way that we do. We work in a very methodical, very straightforward way, and the attackers are sort of piranha-like, kind of shark-like. There's not a lot of organization there, and it's very opportunistic. There are no rules, basically. It is quite literally the Wild Wild West. So generally speaking, the app lifecycle charts tend to be speculation, and they're speculation based on what we have seen on the defensive side. The blue team guys will see, you know, within the remediation process of dealing with certain types of breaches, you'll see certain types of repeatable things, but at generally a very high level, like get access and then maintain access, which is very general. So again, the real attacks are very asymmetric and very opportunistic. If anybody remembers the watering hole attacks that hit Facebook and Google and Twitter and LinkedIn and all those guys last December, that was a great example of it. That exploit, as a quick refresher, was basically attackers compromised a forum that was something like iPhoneDevSDK.com, and the attack was a Java-based attack. And what they did was they targeted the forum on which iPhone developers congregated, inside and outside of work. So once these developers became compromised, the attackers sat and waited, in some cases for months. In the case of one social network that got compromised, it was between 4 to 6 months that the attackers sat quietly on a developer laptop, waiting and doing very quiet reconnaissance until they were able to attempt to grab the entire user store of the social network. And without giving it away, I'm sure that some of you may have received password reset emails from these guys because of that hack. So that was a great example of these guys sat on the network for 4 months to 6 months and literally did nothing but watch until they found the opportune time to strike. So in some of these cases, these guys are quite tenacious. Let's see here. Oops. Well, I'm sorry about that. So here's proof. There was a Ask Me Anything that happened on Reddit earlier last year where a owner of a botnet, the guy claimed he had a 3 million node D botnet, did an Ask Me Anything thread on Reddit where he answered questions from the public and the crowd. And after several hours of very colorful question asking, he basically admitted that he's a college student and he runs this botnet part-time. He's in a very technical program at this college in Germany. He declined to give out any more information because he didn't want to give himself away. And basically what he said was that his approach is to compromise the users by any means possible, then harvest banking credentials and credit card information from them, ball it up, and then sell it to the people higher in the food chain that do the actual credit card fraud because he didn't feel safe doing it himself. And what he did in the spare time after the user had been compromised and he still had a foothold in their machine was that he used their machines to mine Bitcoins. And this is a great example where this particular circumstance doesn't fit the typical charts that you'll see in the information security business that are passed around that describe the app lifecycle. This is a kid who mines Bitcoins and steals credit cards and gives the credit card information to other people to sell. So if he loses a bot or gains a bot, it seems more or less irrelevant because at 3 million bots deep, what's 100 people? So in this case, this guy doesn't necessarily care if he maintains persistence or gets caught because he has such a wide foothold. So as an approach, or here's my approach as a pen tester. Once I get in, I will stay in, and once I get in, I pivot. And by that I mean, once you compromise a machine, you jump from that machine to another machine in the event that the first machine that was compromised has set off any bells or whistles or IDS alerts or alarms. That way, that machine can get chased down and fixed. But in reality, you're sitting incognito on the machine right next to it, and people can't really tell. The intention after that is to move around the network stealthily, as in the example of the social network that was compromised earlier. You want to be invisible, essentially. You want to blend in with outgoing traffic, and you want to make sure that, for example, it was announced, I think yesterday, Brian Krebs put on his blog that Target was compromised, and one of the first things that they believed was that their cash registers were phoning home credit card numbers to Russia via FTP. So for organizations that are looking at outbound traffic on their ingress-egress points and at their choke points for the network, If you see FTP traffic from your cash registers going to Russia, you're going to have a bad time. So you want to make sure that as a bad guy that you're conscientiously obfuscating your egress traffic as much as you can, disguise it as DNS traffic, disguise it as web traffic, things like that, to make sure that you're evading security control mechanisms. So you don't want to start an investigation, right? In the event of the social network I described, the reason that they were caught was because the attacker tried to do a gigantic SQL dump, and SQL dump caused the entire database to become locked for writes while the dump happened. Now this database was several hundred million rows deep, and the dump would have taken upwards of half an hour if they let it continue. And in the course of the evening, when the attacker hit the enter key, the service essentially went down because no new users were able to be created, and user profiles were locked, and no new statuses were able to be posted and things like that. So bells and whistles went off all over the place, and that's how they caught the guy. If this guy had not gone out on the limb to do this gigantic SQL dump, he would have never been caught. And additionally, obviously, you don't want to cause machines to become slow or unstable. The intention is, like this bad animated GIF, you want to stay as invisible as possible, because until you're detected, you can essentially sit and have free range on the network that you've compromised. So that's really cool, but how do you do that? So you use tools, and as much as people say doing this sort of stuff works really well by hand, technically speaking, a browser is a tool. So if you have a good arsenal at your disposal, you have a good little armory, you're going to find yourself doing quite well. First things first, you generally want to do a lot of reconnaissance. You want to use Edgar to find the business listings and get the names of executives and the address of the business out of the FCC filings. That'll give you some really good top-level information. Facebook is a great thing to scrape to see if people have public profiles that they openly say where they work. Spokeo is a wonderful people searching tool that'll help you match addresses to names to phone numbers. Shodan is a search engine that allows you to search for host names, network addresses, and things like that. Think of it like Google and Nmap had a baby. Maltigo is a wonderful tool that helps you put all of this together. For anybody that's ever seen any sort of investigative thriller where you have a detective looking at a painstakingly curated wall of photos and little pieces of yarn connecting newspaper clippings, that is essentially Maltigo, except Maltigo is software. It allows you to have a giant wall of elements that you can connect with pieces of yarn, so to speak, that allow you to reiterate searches and do investigations. The Harvester and MetaGoofil are two command line tools found in many security penetration testing distributions that will allow you to search for example, the Harvester, you give it a domain name or a company name, and it will find every public email address of every employee on Google and Yahoo and Bing and a variety of other search engines. So you can create a list of potential employees for things like a social engineering campaign or a phishing campaign. And FOCA is essentially the same thing, except what it'll do is it'll find publicly accessible documents on the internet. For example, if your organization publishes docs or PDFs or Excel spreadsheets or makes available public documents on a quiet place on the internet that you may not have told a lot of people about, but maybe Google has found, FOCA is a tool that you can use that will fetch all of these all these pieces of documentation, and then it will analyze the documents and tell you what software was used to make them, what the username of the person on the computer was that created the document, what version of the software they used to create the document, what their operating system was, what version of Office they used, if it was on a file share, the path to that file share. So FOCA is a really interesting piece of kit that will allow you to get a lot of interesting internal information out of an organization that doesn't sanitize their documents before they go to the internet. Non-aggressive probing of systems and networks is a wonderful thing to be able to do, because if you're going to be targeting an organization, things like port scans and network probing is going to be detected by machines in place like IDS and IPS equipment. Shodan and Critical IO / the Sonar project that RAPID7 does are great ways to look at public scan data that somebody else has essentially done the scan. So you can take advantage of somebody else's scan without having to run the scan yourself and expose your IP address to the organization that you're assessing or testing. The 2012 Internet Census, for anybody that hasn't heard about it, is last year there was a guy that compromised something like 450,000. I think there were public routers like Linksys, D-Link type pieces of equipment that were left with default credentials. And this person found a way to utilize all those pieces of equipment to scan the entire Internet. So this person scanned the entire Internet and then basically made all the results public in a very sort of white hat way. It's very apparent that the person that did the Internet Census wasn't the black hat. They were in fact probably a white hat, but you can't go on the Internet and tell the world, hi, I hacked 460,000 devices across the world, but I did it in an altruistic way so that we could get a better idea of what we're in for when we start looking at the whole Internet and not expect to walk away in handcuffs. So we don't know who actually did that scan, but whoever did it was very altruistic about it and made the scan available publicly. So passive engagement is a wonderful thing as well. As I mentioned before, there's tools that you can use to identify potential soft targets for purposes of spear phishing and phishing attacks. You can use Metasploit Pro, for example, has a really great component that will allow you to do social engineering attacking. NSP Toolkit is another free piece of software you can use to manage campaigns and lob multiple types of emails at different types of people and record the results. It is also very common to create sock puppet accounts in a variety of social networks to identify if you have, if your target has employees that are susceptible to the sort of quote-unquote pretty girl effect. And a great example of that is in a couple of years ago, there was a security researcher that did a presentation at DEF CON where he talked about creating a profile on LinkedIn called Robin Sage. So Robin Sage is actually a military term. I learned that day as well, which is a term to describe an intelligence operation against your own organization. So think of like a red team operation, but that is purely an intelligence-based intelligence gathering operation. And they created this profile with this. It's actually a hairdresser who was at the talk. They found this picture of this girl online and used her picture with permission to create a bunch of sock puppet accounts, and were able to get really, really sensitive, high government type classified information out of people off of LinkedIn because they filled out a fake resume and a fake profile for this person. So sock puppet accounts, pictures of pretty girls will get you farther than you believe. It is kind of astonishing. Active engagements, you'll have phone calls. You'll have people walking into buildings in disguises. You've probably heard lots of stories of people walking in dressed as a UPS guy or just as a copier repair guy, and being able to sort of freely move about the cabin once they get past the receptionist. One really great example of a phone call type social engineering engagement was Shane McDougall last year at DEF CON Black Hat did the social engineering contest, and his target was Walmart. And I won't spoil the whole story for you. I encourage you to go check it out. But he basically was able to convince Walmart that he was NATO and that they should give him a page and a half worth of very sensitive information because there was a lot of money on the line, and NATO wanted to use this particular Walmart in Canada as a staging area for a giant sort of emergency preparedness operation. The guy on the phone believed every word and was happy to give Shane all the information, and Shane won the contest right there on the phone. So I encourage you to go read about it, but that's a great example of how one phone call can give an attacker so much more information than potentially an attack over the wire. And then you have your typical sort of attacks over the internet where you have web application attacks and network endpoints and the sort of stuff that you see us using Nexpose and Metasploit for. These are the sorts of things that Control Insights will help you deal with to high regard. Oops. So generally speaking, once you're in, you want to hop from one host to another host, and you want to perform port scans and other actions from your compromised host to not expose who you are, what you're doing. The further you go, the wider you go, the longer you'll be able to stay where you are. And again, if you hide your tracks and you exfiltrate your data in a way that is difficult to detect, you can even hack the organization's internal DNS servers to display your external IP address as potentially Facebook, and in some cases this will fool sysadmins and network people into thinking that the traffic that's leaving the network is actually going to a social media site, and they may not investigate. So H.C. Moore's law is the casual attacker power grows at the rate of Metasploit, which is to say that this tool that we develop it enables people on both sides of the fence, the good guys and the bad guys, to basically casually do attacking at the level of growth of the tool. And that being the case, if you're familiar with the tool and you're familiar with what the white hats are, you're on even footing and even ground with the bad guys, which is a lot better than waking up one day to find your business completely infected with all sorts of bots owned by guys in Germany. And I think with that, I'll hand it back to Bill.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. Hopefully everyone enjoyed a little discussion from our resident attacker/hacker here. What I want to do now is take a little bit of time to touch on what Dan mentioned at the end of his discussion there as far as endpoints and a product from Rapid7 called Controls Insight that can help protect and understand what the threats are out at your endpoints. So first of all, security controls. What are they? Security controls are really safeguards or countermeasures that are designed to reduce the security risk, mitigate it, or somehow counteract it. The key thing for me here is to say it does not 100% eliminate the risk. Their ability to 100% eliminate risk is a cost prohibitive or a operationally prohibitive measure. We're looking at ways to help your organization reduce that risk to a manageable level. What kind of controls are out there? There are both technical as well as administrative controls. So are antivirus tools properly enabled? Are you patching firewalls? And then on the administrative side, education is an important thing. Are you running campaigns internally that test your users? Are you letting your users know what potential threats are out there? As far as the endpoints themselves, I touched on a few of these examples earlier in the discussion as far as what the endpoint threats can be. First of all, that USB attack that I had mentioned earlier. A power plant being attacked can have significant repercussions to the power grid, to a large portion of geography. RSA, when that breach happened, RSA is a trusted name in the security industry. I think it rattled a lot of people when they learned that organization, as forward-thinking as they can be, still were able to be attacked out there. LinkedIn passwords. LinkedIn is the social tool for workers as opposed to the Facebook site. Still having your password stolen out there is not something anyone really would want to deal with. And then an NBC hack by a cyber attacker. All of these attacks here went after the endpoints. Looking at endpoint security, why do attackers go after it? Because they know it's the weakest link. Some stats on here from the 2013 Verizon data breach report, and the next report should be coming up relatively soon, but I don't expect the numbers to be significantly different. 2012, 71% of attacks involved compromised end-user devices, whether it be a desktop or a laptop. Of those, nearly 80% of intrusions required little or no specialized skills. This takes nothing away from the skills that Dan and some of our penetration testers have here. They do some fantastic work looking at the more secure organizations. The question is, there are organizations out there that aren't really even using some of the best practices, and they're easy targets. And that's one of the challenges to your organization, is to take away that easy target there. What are some of the endpoint controls that are out there? Everyone's familiar with antivirus software. It's been on your computer for years, I'm sure. Security patches. Everyone sees the occasional updates from your IT team saying your computer needs to be a forced reboot for a security patch to be installed. In fact, I had one of those roll out today, so that I rebooted my laptop before the session started. And then configuration policies, finally, in that list here. Strong passwords. It's easy for everyone to just put down the most common password so you remember it, but if it's easy for you to remember, that means it's easy for someone to then go after that password and then go after your machine. So looking at it from a business standpoint, really, what are the problems looking to address? If you're an information security professional, your challenge is, I'm trying to find a way to secure my endpoints. There are a variety of tools out there, from antivirus to password policy, configurations. All of these require input from you to make those changes, to monitor them, to see how well policies are being enforced across that level there. Your IT management says to you, are we secure? How do you explain that to your team today? What is your process today to go out and look at all those dissimilar systems and understand where's my password policy, where's my antivirus policy? Once you've gotten that, you say, okay, here are some of the things that need to get changed in my organization. I send a request to IT. They enact that request. How do I know it's been done? What are the policies, what are the tools I have to go back in and see that these changes have been made without having to go through those all disparate systems and spend that time, that labor-intensive process to verify those changes have been made. So the solution from RAPID7, and I want to take a little analogy first as far as the fitness trainer analogy. So really before you can implement any sort of a improvement plan, you need to understand where you are today. So here it is early in the new year. A lot of people have New Year's resolutions to lose weight and get to the gym. So before you do that, when you go to that first session with your personal trainer, they'll probably do a fitness assessment with you. What is your weight? What does your exercise schedule look like for the week? How do you work out? From there, let's see where you are relative to benchmarks, relative to what sort of goals you have set for yourself, whether it be I need to be in shape for a race, I need to be in shape for my summer vacation, or I just need to be in better shape than the guy that sits next to me at the office. From there, you create that improvement plan. It's what are the steps I need to take to make myself better, the fitness plan. Is it my diet? Is it my exercise? How do I then go about getting myself improved? And as with many things, it's a cycle. It's not a one-time event where I go through this process once and I'm done. It is an ongoing cycle. With security, it's an ongoing cycle. The threats are ever-changing. It is a rapidly advancing environment that as soon as you feel as though you've closed a loop, someone may find another one. So this is a constant battle out there. Looking at it to the RAPID7 Controls Insight, we use that same measure, analyze, improve cycle there to look at your security controls. So first, we measure how well those controls are deployed and configured throughout your organization. And I say deployed and configured, there are two things. If you have an antivirus out there, but it's not configured properly, it's not up to date, how good is that tool out there? Next, we analyze and look at your measurement, your rating against best security practices. In this area here, we looked at 3 different metrics there. First is the SANS list of critical controls. We have developed our list to look at that list. What are the critical items on there? Second of all, the Australian DSD, the Australian Defence Organization, again looking at what are critical controls at the endpoints and how do those mitigate risk to the end user. And finally, our customers. RAPID7 has a large customer base across all industries. We listen to what they say as far as what are the controls that they are currently experiencing the most pain with. Where do they need help ensuring that they have controls deployed throughout the endpoints to reduce the risk to their overall environment? And then finally, how do you create a plan to improve that? What is your ongoing methodology to ensure that not only are you secure today, but you can do everything you can to ensure that your security continues going forward? With that, I want to dive into here and just show you a quick look at what the Controls Insight console looks like. We've designed this product as an easy-to-use interface for security professionals to get a quick assessment of what the controls environment are in their organization. I'm going to zoom in on a couple different sections of the screen and walk you through a few key points. First of all, in the upper left hand, we have, this is really your overall grade to your organization. We have here a rating of 0 to 10, 10 being the ideal rating, 0 being the lowest rating. Each one of those is broken out into email, network, USB, and web. So looking at 4 different categories of how you can put controls or how you would categorize controls within your organization. In this scenario here, this is one of our demo environments. We purposely set it up so it is a poor environment to show what it would look like. But 3 is across the board. And you notice each one of those 3s is circled in red. This highlights that it is or illustrates that it's a high risk there. As you move up to the middle range, it turns into the yellow, and as you guessed it, when you get up into the upper echelon, you move to that green to show that you're in a far better place from a security standpoint. So that's your quick view as far as where I am today. Next, we have a trend line that shows where your organization has been over the last time period here. In this instance here, I have a 1 month, so a year-to-date view of our security controls of our test organization here, going back into around the Thanksgiving time. The blue line represents the grade of the organization across those controls. As you can see, we've had some bumps here. We've increased our security in early December, and then something changed in mid-December. It dropped down a little bit. Then we went back up in late December. Overlaid on that in the green, that's the number of assets that are being examined or analyzed in this environment. So you can see a slow increase of assets over time. This lets you know this is our security posture, and this is what our level of assets we're looking at over the time period. Where this may come into play is, let's say you have a university environment where in the end of August, all of a sudden, your assets number has a huge spike up, and your security grade has a big drop down. Translation, okay, we have a lot of new students on campus here that have desktops that are not well controlled. What do we do as an organization to go out and make those changes? So when you look at the next steps here, we give you a prioritized list to move from that, in this instance here, a grade of 3 up to a grade of 4.2. What are some of the steps that you need to take? Excuse me, what are the exact steps you need to take to make that change here? Diving into that, we actually give you the full deployment steps. So it's one thing to tell you to enable that URL reputation scanning. We go one step further and give you the deployment steps, what the OSs are that require this, go down and tell you where to get the materials, where to go into the actual OS changes to deploy this. Also, part of this is the references. So you're going to your IT professional and your security professional saying, we need to make this change to the organization. They'll ask you why. We provide a third-party references as far as what some of the changes are and why they should be important for your organization. The final piece of this from just this quick overview is the executive report. When you've gone through your analysis here, you have completed from an IT professional, you've completed your report. How do you then provide something up to your senior leadership to show what changes are in the organization, what our coverage level is today? We have a publish to PDF button that takes the overall defense grade as well as all those controls and gives you a more detailed view of what each one of them is across the network and how your coverage is. So you're not wasting time or spending time, excuse me, getting that level of reporting done so that you can show out to the organization. So as far as what's next, we do have a free trial available as well as a link here for more information on the RAPID7 Controls Insight product. We certainly invite anyone to go out there if you have further interest in the product. There are free trials, got some more information about it. At this point, I'm going to conclude the portion of this session, and we're going to open it up to the chat window for some questions here. So I do have a few questions that came in during the session. The first one I actually want to ask is going to go to, looks like it's going to Dan. And if you're still out there, if you could, the question is, what is the typical reaction of customers when you show them you have breached them during your penetration testing?
In most cases, they expect it. In fact, as a professional, it's almost expected that I should breach their network, and if I don't breach their network, then either I've done something wrong, or they have very robust defenses. So generally speaking, probably 4 out of 5 times, the customer will know during the kickoff call whether they expect one of our pen testers to get in. If they think that they have adequate defenses, then they'll say up front, they'll say, well, this is what we've done, and these are the sort of defenses that we have, and we believe that you don't stand a chance, to which we'll say, challenge accepted, right? But in most cases, they will say, well, we understand, we do have a lay of the land. We do understand that there are gaps in our environment, and you're essentially here to help us find the gaps. So the short answer is, generally speaking, they're not surprised, and they most of the time they expect it.
All right, thank you. The next question I have here, and I think also on the line for us to help with some of these questions, is one of our senior software engineers, Bill Sharar. Bill, the question I'm going to give to you is, what is the data feed you're using to populate the scores, i.e., where do we pull this information from? Bill, if you're on mute, you need to unmute, please. Oh, looks like Bill's having some audio problems. So I'll tackle this one from my perspective, and if he gets that resolved, I'll let him chime in here. So the data feeds for Controls Insight comes from our Nexpose product. This is our vulnerability management tool that we have. It's been out for many years now. It's one of the industry-leading tools out there. So we look to that Nexpose data feed to pull this when you're running your Nexpose scans. We pull the information into the Controls Insight and perform this report out to show the different levels of controls, how they're deployed across the organization, and what the level of security is to the organization. A couple other questions. Just want to take it from an administrative standpoint. Several people have asked if the slides will be posted later, and they will be coming out later to you after the show. Excuse me, after the webinar. Another question that came in was regarding the rating system. If a customer's network shows it's a 10 out of 10 on that rating system, does that mean I'm secure? The short answer to that question is it's a yes and it's a no. What it means is the portions of your network that Controls Insight is evaluating has you as a highly secure organization. That said, your organization is only secure as the weakest link out there. And I cite the example of that USB attack where, yes, if you had USB locked down your desktop, you're able to prevent that. But the issue is someone got that file into your organization. So having a robust security policy throughout your organization is the best way to keep your organization secure and prevent you getting breached. Security is a challenging place to be in that there are hackers out there, attackers out there looking to steal what you have, and your goal as a security professional is to do your best to stay one step ahead of them. Next question I have on here is, and this is back to you, Dan. Dan, do you do more white box testing or black box testing?
Generally speaking, it's black box. Most of the clients that I get assigned to want me to approach from the sense of an attacker. They don't want to give me any hints, or they don't want to give me a leg up. They want to see, this is a live fire exercise. The purpose of getting this type of pen test is to see if a bad guy with my skill set really did target their organization, how far can they get? In some cases, there's a lot of communication between myself and the clients, of course. And in some cases, the clients will say, okay, well, we think that based on the progress we're seeing now, we feel safe giving you a couple of extra nuggets of information. For example, one of the last engagements that I had, the client gave me a list of something like a dozen additional email addresses in addition to what I found using Metagoofil and the Harvester and looking around on LinkedIn and Spokio and Facebook, because they specifically wanted me to target their executive staff. And the executive staff were not heavy users of social networks of any kind. So in most cases, it's black box. Sometimes they will sort of gently steer the engagement to cover certain bits and pieces that they would like to get sort of an articulate answer on. But for the most part, it's black box with a very little bit of gray box testing, if that answers the question adequately.
All right, thanks, Dan. And Bill, you got your audio working? Because I have a question I'd like to send your direction now.
I do.
All right, perfect. The question is, what type of access is required on target systems in order to gather the control data? Are credentials required, admin credentials?
Yes, actually, admin credentials are required to do a scan and get the data that we need to get. to look to see what software is installed, what's running, for instance, and those are both required for the antivirus software.
Perfect. Thank you. I have another question coming in as far as what are the different controls that we actually monitor in the product here. I can send you two things. First of all, if you go to the link I provided on the webinar there, it has a list of controls, but I'll run down them real quickly here. We look at is the operating system up to date? Is antivirus installed, updated, and active on the system? Is USB access allowed or disallowed? Are high-risk applications up to date, such as Java, Adobe? Is there a password policy for a difficult-to-guess password enforced? Are the browsers hardened? Are the browsers up to date? Is code execution allowed? What is user access control enabled? Is email attachment filtering enabled? And finally, is the Windows firewall enabled? And just looking at some more questions here. This is great. I appreciate all the questions coming in there. Bill, I think another question for you out here as far as something with the controls insight. Is the software something that's constantly scanning the infrastructure once deployed? How and how does that work?
No, it can be run on demand or scheduled to run within certain windows. It's actually, we use the same scanner as Nexpos, as the Nexpos product, and it's very highly orchestrated and can be done on demand or scheduled and run, even paused within windows and so forth.
All right, thank you. All right, let's look through some more of these questions here. Another question specific, and I think this is one for you, Bill, as well. Can it turn specific controls on or off?
Yes, that's a new feature actually. So now, say if you're getting pestered by a low grade and a message that says you need to, say, for instance, antivirus is not deployed, and you know you have antivirus deployed, but the fact is you use that you prefer some antivirus software that we don't yet support, you can turn that control off and not be bothered by it, and it won't bring down your grade when you know that you, in fact, do have antivirus deployed.
And here's a question that I'm going to throw to Dan here. This is, I think you can probably take this in a couple of different directions. Question is, shouldn't organizations use honeypots to really lure people coming into their organization versus having as a way to, I guess, deflect them, is what the question is asking?
Oh, absolutely. I fully encourage people using honeypots. The more you can do to make yourselves more aware of what your attackers are doing to target you, the better. I encourage everybody to use honeypots. Honeypots are great, and we even, during one of our recent RAPID7 hackathon sessions, we had a couple of guys basically come up with honeypots that can be put onto Raspberry Pis, which you can buy for $35. So for a very, very low investment, or even if you have an existing VMware infrastructure or private cloud or anything to that effect, where you can quickly and easily spin up small, low power, low cost machines. Absolutely. Set up a bunch of honeypots and just let them phone home to, if you have a SIM or a central syslog collector or something like that. It'll give you a great idea of, is somebody in your LAN port scanning everything? You know, if you have a machine, for example, there was a talk that happened at ShmooCon, which is an information security conference that happens in Washington, D.C. in the end of January, beginning of February. And there was one presenter that talked about the experiences he had doing pen tests against organizations that did have honeypots. And he said almost in every circumstance he got caught because the honeypot is designed to look like something juicy. And as a pen tester, you're supposed to go after the stuff that's juicy. And presumably, unless a honeypot is advertising the fact that it's a honeypot, you're going to catch stuff with it. So I encourage everybody to go ahead and use them. They're wonderful tools.
Thank you. Another question came in regarding what type of desktops this Controls Insight can evaluate. At this point, it is Windows desktops only. The question was around, do we have a Linux product out there? We are constantly evaluating the networks out there, our customers' needs out there. At this point, we have a Windows product, but we do always look at what's out there coming into the market. Next question I want to go to is, and this is, I guess, back to you, Dan. What are some of the sources you have to get your exploit tools that you use, or what are some of the better sources you use for exploit tools? Did we lose you, Dan?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's
so
all right.
generally speaking, the tool set that I use is something like 80 to 90% free tools. The only paid tools that I use are obviously Metasploit Pro and Expose and Burp. I like Burp so much I actually bought my own personal license. It's only $300, and if you're a web hacker, I encourage you to spend the $300. It's totally worth it. Other than that, the list that I had displayed earlier, a lot of them come packaged within the Kali or Backtrack penetration testing distributions. There are a lot of other pen testing Linux distributions you can download completely for free that are live CDs that you can boot a VM into, and they're packed to the gills full of awesome and amazing tools. So in a lot of cases, it's just so much as go grab one of these distributions and start thumbing through the tools that are installed. In a lot of cases, they're going to come with all the stuff that you need. And of course, the security community is continually developing and refining these tools, so it's a good idea to stay abreast of the new stuff and sort of the ebb and flow of the tide of the tools that come in now, depending on obviously how often you do this sort of stuff. But just picking up Kali Linux, for example, is a great head start because it's literally full of several thousand tools that are completely free and open source.
All right, thank you. Bill, I think I have another question for you. If a customer already is using Nexpose, can Control Insight use the results from the existing scans rather than running additional scans?
Well, I guess Controls Insight is currently uses the same scan engine, and so our checks are already there in many cases. So it would be possible to get controls in, with a license, get Controls Insight's results and analyze them and not have to scan again. It depends on what version of Nexpose it is, if those Controls Insight checks are already being done or not.
Okay, thank you. And I think we're kind of coming up towards the end of the hour here. I want to try and wrap up as far as some of the questions here. I think one of the ones I have in here is, the question is, why did you choose the controls you monitor? I touched on this a little bit, but really we looked at a couple of different organizations out there to help provide us the guidance on which of the different controls that we monitor there. The SANS Top 20 list is one of the key documents out there that highlights what are the core controls for an organization to use to monitor and secure their environment. I also mentioned the Australian DSD list, again, a outwardly facing, externally facing document that talks to the different controls that are used to lock down your endpoint environment. And then from our standpoint, our customers are a great source of information. We do our best to listen to them when they have questions as far as, hey, can you implement this here? One of the examples of that is looking at the antivirus tools that we do cover with the Controls Insight. Kaspersky was a recent, addition to that. Based on some customer feedback, our first version of the product, the first release, did not have Kaspersky, and then that feedback said we need to get this installed in the product and allow that valuable antivirus tool to be part of what we check up on and look at. With that, I think I'm going to wrap up now. We're running out of the questions I have here. Again, the slides will be provided to users at the end of the session here. I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. Hopefully you learned some information. And please feel free to reach out to Rapid7 with more questions.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. We did get a ton of questions, so if we weren't able to answer yours during the broadcast, we'll do our best to address it after the fact. So you can contact any of the people on your screen or myself, and we'll try to answer your questions as best we can. So thank you to Bill, Dan, and Bill for your great presentation, and thank you everyone else for joining us. We hope to see you at another Rapid7 webcast again soon.